Hello and welcome. If you've ever visited the island of Lindisfarne, you will probably have seen the statue of Aidan. While I was on furlough, I read quite a bit about Aidan and discovered what an inspiring saint he is. He was a 7th century monk who was sent in response to an invitation from the King of Northumbria to set up a monastery on the island of Lindisfarne and bring the gospel to the Anglo-Saxon people. He wasn't actually first choice, but the first person who was sent found the Anglo-Saxon tribes so terrifying that he refused to stay. Aidan, however, was a man of great compassion. He recognised people's need of the good news of Jesus Christ and dedicated his life to sharing the gospel with them. We're told that despite his status as Abbot of Lindisfarne, he always travelled on foot so that he could meet as many people as possible. If they were unbelievers, he told them about Jesus. If they were Christians, he strengthened and encouraged them in their faith. Aidan and his monks discovered that the harvest was indeed plentiful, and their mission led to an extraordinary advance of Christian belief in England. You may not have been to Lindisfarne, but you've certainly been to Penny Lane and seen St Barnabas Church, and some of you, I know it very well indeed. And this week we've been celebrating the feast of St Barnabas. Like Aidan, Barnabas responded to Jesus' call for labourers in the harvest field. He was one of the very early disciples, and we first hear of him in Acts chapter 4, when he sells a field and gives the money to the apostles to assist them in the ministry of the gospel. In fact, that's when he gets the name Barnabas. His real name was Joseph, but he became known as Barnabas because it meant son of encouragement. And Barnabas indeed proved to be a great encourager. When the apostles in Jerusalem heard that people in Antioch had started believing in Jesus, they sent Barnabas to check things out. Barnabas was delighted to discover that God was doing a new work among the people of Antioch and stayed for over a year to strengthen and encourage them in their faith. He also invited a recent convert to Christianity to work with him, a man called Paul, who, because of his past history, some people were suspicious of. Paul's extraordinary ministry flourished because Barnabas was willing to give him an opportunity and nurture him. Barnabas and Paul travelled great distances together, telling people about Jesus. Together they came to understand that the gospel wasn't just for the Jews, but also for the Gentiles, and stepped out beyond their comfort zone to reach them. But eventually they separated, and Barnabas went to Cyprus, taking a young man called Mark with him. Mark hadn't so far proved reliable, and Paul didn't want him. But Barnabas, true to his name, decided to give him a second chance. That's the last we hear about Barnabas. But his sacrificial giving, his teaching, and his willingness to encourage the gifts of others had a profound influence on the early church. Without him, things could have been quite different. He is a patron saint to be proud of. Aidan and Barnabas had different gifts. They ministered at different times and in quite different contexts. But they were both motivated by a Christ-like compassion for people. Like Jesus, they recognised that people were, as Matthew puts it in our reading, harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And because they believed that the gospel of Jesus was good news for all people, like the disciples in our reading, they went out of their comfort zones, took risks, and went into uncharted territory. And although Aidan's ministry was 13 centuries ago, and Barnabas's was 20 centuries ago, in some ways we find ourselves in similar circumstances today. We too are facing uncharted territory. The congregation at St Barnabas will soon be embarking on a new journey with their new leader, and no doubt such major change will at times take people out of their comfort zones. All Hallows also faces challenges as it becomes a single parish again and tries to work out what its priorities should be in a very different world to the one we had become familiar with before the pandemic. But just as Jesus first observed, and Barnabas and Aidan later discovered, people today are still looking for direction and leadership. They too are harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. So even though we don't quite know what it will look like, the task for each one of us is to bring the good news of God's love into our situation. How we do it will vary. It may be by directly speaking to people about Jesus. It may be by nurturing and encouraging the gifts of others. It may be by encouraging one another and becoming more and more the type of loving community that reflects God's love to the world. For all of us, it should include generous giving. Jesus says that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Let us not simply ask God to send more workers into the harvest field, but let us, like the disciples, Barnabas, Aidan, and many other women and men of faith now and in the past, go into the harvest field and do what we can to help bring that harvest home. Amen.